I hope you are also enjoying some of this lovely autumn sunshine. So today's quite a meaty topic. We are talking about boundaries, and these are ongoing things that we need to deal with. Can bring up difficult conversations. It can touch on our own issues around what we feel comfortable with, and some of the issues we might have around our own self-esteem, around our own needs. So it can end up feeling like this very challenging space to be in. And I think particularly as women and working in a caring profession, it can bring even bigger challenges, because we work in this field because we want to help people, because we want to make a difference in the world. Generally, I think a lot of people who work in this field are also quite energetically sensitive, or certainly sensitive to other people's needs and vibe. And so all of these things can combine to us finding it really hard to hold these boundaries and still feel like a good person, because sometimes you can feel like the big meanie saying no to somebody, and you feel perhaps like, oh, really the compassionate thing is to be understanding of their situation and give everybody what they need all the time, and that that maybe boundary rules, but there's many kinds of boundaries that are possible. Like, it doesn't have to be like the Berlin Wall, it doesn't have to be this massive, highly guarded, inflexible thing. It's more about, the way I see it is more about a negotiation between us as teachers and the students, and it also may be between us as teachers and the space that we're working in lots of times in our lives. But it's about this compromise that we have around having everyone's needs met in a reasonable and fair way. And often there isn't one perfect solution. This is why we do they should or shouldn't be, but we have to feel for ourselves what's appropriate given the circumstances we're in. So there's a phrase that I'm loving at the moment, which is, there are no perfect solutions, there's only trade-offs. And I think this is a really useful thing to refer to sometimes when we have these what feel like ethical dilemmas, and we want to be a good person and do the right thing. And often there's more than one right way of dealing with it. And sometimes looking at, well, what's the needs of the person? What's the needs of everyone else in the class? What are our needs? What's a fair solution that works for everyone? Where, nobody feels like they're being treated unfairly. So, I think if we start looking at it as this kind of co-created contract to some degree about how we run our classes, and that it's a working progress, and over time you may things as maybe unforeseen issues arise, and then there might be a situation that comes up that we haven't imagined and we don't quite know how to handle it. And that's fine. It's not a failing. We learn through experience. And then we may then feel, after there's been an issue to fix, it's like, oh well, how can I prevent that happening in the future? Or let's prepare a response or a policy around this kind of thing, so that the next time something similar happens, you're in a much better place to deal with it. So I guess that's the first thing, is just really reinforcing the need and the benefit of having some boundaries, and maybe another word for it is policy. What are your policies around payment, time, behavior, what happens in the class, out of the class, all of these things. And maybe that's a more comfortable word for you. So these things are really important, and I think it's not only about being fair to everybody, but another thing I wanted to talk about today is this other level, that when we are holding our own boundaries, when we stick to our policy, when we stick to the T's and C's as stated, we're actually modeling a kind of strength to our students. And this is something that's really important to bear in mind, that it can be a really helpful thing to hold a boundary with someone, even when in the moment it can feel really unfair or challenging, or you might feel like you're being a little bit harsh. But in the long run, there's a lot of benefits with gently pushing back. And so we can do this in a really nice and kind way. We don't have to be angry or strict or telling off or dismissive. We can be really understanding and still say, but it needs to be like this. So a really important point to think about, and sometimes it's hard in the moment to necessarily know, but something to maybe try and practice keeping in your mind is, if there is an issue that comes up, to check in with, what is your responsibility? What is your stuff? How much of this problem is yours to fix? What is your job and what your responsibilities are? And those are the things that you can address. But quite often issues can come up, and actually it's not your problem to fix. It's the student's issue that they need to fix. And maybe it's part of their own their own blocks, their own baggage, their own stuff, their own habits. This might be a point of growth for your student to deal with this issue. And so actually, when we gently push back, and it could be, for example, say around timekeeping, if someone's persistently late to class, it's a really important thing to hold, that policy of, beyond 5 minutes, if you're late, you can't come into the class, because, and you can give all the reasons, like you will have missed the warm-up and it might not be so safe for you, it's disruptive to other people, there's lots of reasons why someone rocking up late is not going to be great in class. And not only does it mean that that student doesn't get the benefit of a whole class, it also means it's disruptive to other people. It can be disrupts the way that you teach, so it actually affects the whole class. And people will come with stories about why they're late. And so this is a really good example of actually your responsibility is to show up on time yourself, to prepare and teach the class, to hold space for everyone, make class runs well, and actually to prevent disruption to the class by things like that's your job actually, is to hold that boundary. Students' job to get there on time, and they may have all kinds of reasons why they feel it's unfair for you to not let them in. They couldn't help that XYZ happened and they turned up late and then missed it. And it can feel quite mean at the time to go, look, I'm really sorry that this happened this morning, but I have to be fair and consistent, and I can't let you in the class when you turn up 20 minutes late because it's not safe, it's too disruptive, and it's too late for me to give a space to somebody else. So, why should you have to lose income because somebody is late? So there's all these different needs. Oh, I'm seeing people joining. Morning, Kim. Hi, Hajnal. So, and this is the thing that sometimes in trying to be a good person, we can start allowing people to encroach on our boundaries. But also what we're missing out on are some of the benefits the student gets by us, being a little bit firm around this. Because, if there is this kind of repeat behavior, for example, of being late, by pushing back and holding the boundary, we stop enabling whatever is going on in their life. If we're accepting their excuses, then it's just allowing that cycle to continue. And actually, when we hold that boundary, we're enabling our students or encouraging them to grow, because they've slid a problem onto our plate, and we just need to very nicely go, oh, I'm sorry, but this isn't mine, take it back. It's not your job to fix or to absorb the consequences of someone else's time management. And actually, when we hold that boundary, it could be, for example, that the reason they're late is that they find it really hard to prioritize themselves. It may be they find it really hard to say no to other people, that they're running around looking after everybody else, that someone else in turn has put on them their own problem that your student now feels they have to fix. And then that means they end up running late for their class. And actually, if we're holding our boundaries and saying, you can't come in late and you still have to pay, then that can be something maybe that reinforces their resolve, and that enables them to push back in their own life to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this for you. You'll have to fix that because I have my yoga class. And if I'm not there on time, I'm going to lose the money and I don't get to practice. So I'm sorry, but this is your thing. So we can just sort of have this positive knock-on effect that we might not immediately see, and we may meet resistance because it's asking people for them then to have an uncomfortable conversation. But by us doing it with them, and it helps them have an example maybe of how they might word it, of how they could hold their boundaries without exploding into a massive argument about it, of just calmly, compassionately going, oh, I understand that must be very difficult for you. Unfortunately, for these reasons, things have to be run this way. And maybe talk to them about managing how they do it next time. So, for example, at Maggie's, I do have somebody who often could be late, and we spoke about it. And I'll allow a wiggle room of 5 minutes or so, but there was a time where she did arrive, about 20 minutes plus late. And I said, look, I'd already prepped the staff there that if people arrive that late, they can't come in. It's just not safe. But because it's a big centre, and I saw her afterwards, she was understanding, but obviously a bit upset about missing out. And I know she has an issue with the buses, and public transport can be unreliable. But we had a conversation, and I suggested to her, or I asked, would it be possible to maybe aim to come maybe a whole hour before the class? And if the buses run really well, she can hang out in the centre, she can have tea and biscuits and, have chats with people, use the library, like just treat it as, not quite a spa day, but, it's a beautiful centre. There's lots of other facilities there. Why not aim to come ultra early and then just have a really nice, relaxed time, chatting, having some tea, enjoying the roof terrace, like make it a bit more of a luxurious thing. And then you'll be nice and relaxed to come into class because you won't be running down the road because the bus was late. And she's been doing that since. And actually, it's given her even more time for a bit of self-care, knowing that, there can be issues with public transport. I totally get that. But that maybe she then gives herself even more time to focus on relaxation, to maybe have more conversations and connections with other people, so that it wasn't just me finger wagging saying, if you're not here on time, you can't come in. All right, sort it out. That is not a nice way to tell someone. But if we say to them, look, these are the reasons why we can't. I would love you to be in the class. What needs to happen for you to be here on time? And so it's a gentle way of, holding the line, because it's really disruptive to other people. If you're halfway through a class and somebody comes in and, they're then taking off their coat and shoes and, and then I have to keep an eye on them and think about the fact they haven't done a warm up, and, it gets a bit chaotic, and that's not good for everybody. So, these holding the line with people can be really beneficial for the student as well, and it's helping them deal with the challenges that is causing them to push up against your boundaries. And when we kind of slide those issues back, I'd say not only are we modeling to them, but it's empowering them to make changes in their life, to work on those points of growth as well, that there may be other things in their life that they need to shift. And again, around payment, I was talking in a previous episode about the issues that can come up around discounts. And some of the issues around that I've experienced is that people make their choices about what they prioritize with their spending. So again, we want to be compassionate when these very real things may come up, but it's also about really empowering people to really prioritize their own well-being. They may feel like it's difficult for them to to sometimes spend on certain things, particularly if it's on themselves, that it's hard to justify, or all these other issues. And this doesn't mean that your prices are too high. It's more about, what needs to happen in the mindset of your student, that they can shift how they're budgeting and put their well-being above other things. So it may be about they find it hard to justify spending on themselves. It may also be that, they feel that, that maybe they're getting, or they're valuing other ways they spend money on themselves more. And that could be around more unhealthy lifestyle choices, around, having junk food takeaways, or maybe going down the pub. And it's not like we shouldn't do these things at all. But if their goal is their well-being, and that's why they've signed up for yoga, this is a holistic thing. It's not just that you rock up to yoga once a week and then nothing else in your life changes. Ideally, yoga starts to kind of seep in our everyday life in terms of, our whole approach to the way that we live. And again, if people are then kind of forced to make some choices, that we're not enabling some habits that are counteracting their yoga practice. Obviously, I'm really aware for some people there is genuine financial hardship. That is a different conversation. But for a lot of people, again, it can just be about, prioritizing, because I've had plenty of people that I've worked with in my classes who I know are not on a high income, and they've been absolutely blatant about the fact that they're on a limited budget, but they are prioritizing buying their supplements, doing their yoga, eating really well. They've cut out other things that they feel are an unnecessary luxury, or things that actually are counterproductive to trying to improve their health and their well-being. So there's all these reasons why actually that gentle pushing back of the issues that are not ours to fix. So if somebody is saying like there's not enough equipment for them, or the temperature in the room is an issue, or things like that, these are things that's in our, that's within our ballpark to fix. If people are having issues like that, if the booking system's not working properly, if the wrong payment's been taken, then yeah, absolutely, that's our job to fix those things, give refunds if necessary, sort out our admin, like all of these sorts of things. There can be legitimate issues that students bring to us that are our problem to fix, but there are some things that's not, and recognizing that when it happens. And I guess, and a little tip that I got recently, which is super helpful, is sometimes we might be in a difficult conversation and somebody's asking us something, and there might just be something where we don't feel completely comfortable, but we're not quite sure why. To just say, give me some time to think about it. I'll see what I can do. So in some situations, for example, if somebody is saying, can I have a discount? I'm really struggling, to say, well, or let's talk about it another time, and just give yourself some space to be able to sit with that a little bit, to maybe check out with yourself, is it really my responsibility to do this? Do I have to fix this problem for them? Is this something that, my student actually needs to deal with in their own sort of private life? gives you a chance to think about that, and it gives you a chance to think about what your policy may be, or if the situation does actually fit the criteria that you've already set. I think giving yourself space to think and not feeling pressured to answer in the moment is a really good thing, you know. And I'm just thinking of other boundary things. I think also, say, around time, it's not only about showing up to class, but sometimes how much time somebody might want of yours outside of the class, you know. And a classic thing can be the after class chat. And I have had somebody who, you know, just really was looking for lots more support than I could actually give. So in fact, there's two different examples. I think there's one where I had somebody said, oh, can I just ask, you know, like with my knee, I just want to check in this position. Is this the right place? Or I have a bit of a strange sensation. Is that normal? And, you know, it's leading into effectively wanting a private one-to-one after a group class. So, you know, I had to, and it was on more than one occasion. So I had to find ways to close that down in a gentle way, and just say things like, that's a great question. Why don't we discuss this next week in class? Or, you know, or to say, actually, why don't you do some practice between now and next week and try a few different variations and see what works for you? And actually, rather than her being so dependent on me telling her every micro cue, is like, actually, you're more than capable to work this out for yourself. You don't need me to tell you all of those things. It's perfectly safe for you to practice at home, and you feel for yourself, where does it feel most stable? Where does it feel most comfortable? You know, and again, it's that gentle pushing back, and it's not so much saying, class is finished, I'm not helping you now. It's a gentler way of, oh, that's great, you're so interested in developing your practice further. Would you like me to give you a book recommendation or a YouTube channel or something, where you give them other resources to empower them to further their own practice? And so again, looking at, it's not my responsibility to, you know, to give her free one-to-ones or to give extra coaching outside of class. And she's welcome to book a one-to-one with me if she wanted. But actually, it's not an unreasonable demand of my time and energy for me to maybe pass on one or two resources that would be helpful for her. You know, so this pushing back, it really empowers your student to grow. It can help them to, you know, to build more confidence in themselves, more trust in themselves, in fixing their own problems. You know, it stops us enabling bad habits. And it also prevents us from burning out or reaching that point where we then feel so irritated and frustrated because there's been this encroachment. And I think with most of us, we have a certain capacity of a little bit of overstep of boundaries. And then there's a point at when it gets too much to our core needs and something switches on. And if you're ever feeling either more upset, irritation, or anger, then you might think, oh, you know, that's a bit of an overreaction. I would say that would be a sign that your boundaries have been really encroached upon. I think that's like an inner alarm bell going, like, this is not okay. And we don't want to get to that stage. You know, for our own well-being, we don't want to get there. And also, that's not nice for the students, because they'll feel that shift in energy even if you try to cover it. So this whole thing of being really clear with your boundaries up front to manage everyone's expectations, so everyone knows what the rules are, is fair to everyone, there's transparency, like there's real good ethical behavior and integrity in that. And then if we're just consistently reinforcing that and gently pushing back, there might be this little to and fro, but then you stopping it getting to this crisis point or this conflict point where things might then feel really upsetting for everybody. Like, we really want to avoid all of those. And I think, as a closing thought, I love podcasts. I listen to a lot these days. And there was one with an interview with Brené Brown, and I really like her work. And she had done a lot of research about, on very compassionate people. It was I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think her background's in social sciences, and she did this, wide scale research in personalities about degrees of compassion. But what she found was really interesting was that the people who had the highest level of compassion were also the ones who had the strongest boundaries. And I thought that was such an interesting thing, that actually holding these boundaries is actually what enables us to be really compassionate. There's so much integrity and kindness in that, that, just as a little thing to remind yourself, if you're in the moment and feeling like, oh, am I being a meanie by you like holding this boundary? It's like, the most compassionate people are the ones who hold the strongest boundaries. So maybe that can just be a little mantra for the week to maybe help you deal with any difficult conversations that you might have coming up. So I hope that's been helpful for you. As always, if you have any thoughts or insights, it's always lovely to hear in the comments below. And I'm going to wish you a very lovely rest of the week. And before I go, just as a reminder, I am speaking as part of a summit which starts, I think, on Monday next week. So there are, I think, 19 speakers. There's a lot of speakers. There's a virtual summit that I really recommend, and it's all free. It's all about becoming an empowered change maker through a trauma-informed approach. So I really recommend you sign up to that. There's loads of really interesting speakers. I'm going to put a link in the group today for you as well. So thank you for people joining me live. Lovely to see you here. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.